Greetings, learners. I take this wonderful opportunity to welcome each and every one of you to our BLIS online program from the School of Social Sciences, Indira Gandhi National Open University. Well, my name is Chamo Yantan, Faculty of Library and Information Science. Well, today's focus of the presentation is the first unit of BLI 2-5, that is Basics of Communication, and the topic for today's presentation is titled Listening, Meaning, Stages, Importance, Types and Barriers of Listening. So in this presentation, I shall be covering the meaning of listening, and also explain the stages of listening, importance of listening, types and the barriers of listening. Well, today we are living in an information, communication and technology with so many smartphones and social media platforms. But the question is, are we listening more with all these facilities in our hand? I think the challenge today we face is that we talk more and we listen less. And I think this is one of the reasons why there is a lot of miscommunications, a lot of conflicts around the world today that we witness. Well, for a discipline like Library and Information Science, which is a service-oriented profession, communication skills, especially learning, listening skills become very, very essential, because in the discipline of, when we are in a library, there will be so many learners, visitors coming to the library seeking for, information, and also for, many other activities where the professionals in the library will be handling or will be, dealing with all the visitors in the library. And in such kind of scenario, how do we give our best, service to the users? And I think one of the best way to give, service is first of all to listen and to understand the problem. And that's how we will be able to, as a librarian, will be able to, address the problem. And that's how users' satisfaction take place in a library. So that itself is a justification why it becomes very important, for students, studying BLIS to study communication skills, and especially to enhance listening skills, so that they will be able to give a much more efficient and a meaningful service in the profession. Well, the learning outcomes for today's presentations are: explain the meaning of listening, and then secondly, understand the stages of listening, and thirdly, understand the importance of listening, and fourthly, understand the different types of listening, and lastly, understand the barriers of listening. Well, before we go further, let me read out a few quotes on listening. Well, Janet Winderson stated, "Everything in writing begins with language, and language begins with listening." And Robert Baden-Powell stated, "If you make listening and observation your occupation, you will gain much more than you can by talk." And then Malcolm Forbes stated, "The art of conversation lies in listening." And then Dalai Lama stated, "When you talk, you are repeating what you know. But when you listen, you learn something new." I think all the quotes which I have stated, which are stated by some of the renowned personalities from across the globe, this itself speaks volume about the importance and the power of listening. And Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen also stated, the most basic and a powerful way to connect to another person is to listen. Just listen. Perhaps the most important thing we ever give each other is our attention, and our attention also means listening. I think this itself is an explanatory why it is so important for us to learn or enhance listening skills in our communication skills. Well, now we shall try to go further, try to understand what is meant by listening. Well, listening is the ability to accurately receive and interpret messages in the communication process. And the word listen derives from its roots in the Germanic language from the word Hellesnan, which means to pay attention. And the first and the foremost communication skill that we learn in our life is nothing but listening. And listening is the learned process of receiving, interpreting, recalling, evaluating, and responding to verbal and non-verbal messages. We begin to engage with the listening process long before we engage in any recognized verbal or non-verbal communication. It is also after listening for months as infants that we begin to consciously practice our own forms of expressions. And listening is the key to all effective communication. Without the ability to listen effectively, messages are easily misunderstood. And as a result, communication breaks down and the senders of the message can, easily become frustrated or irritated. And if there is one communication skill you should aim to master, then it is listening. And listening is so important that many top employers provide listening skills training for their employees. I think this is a fact because many organizations, they realize the importance of listening. So how they do is that they will organize training programs to their employees, to be a very good listener, especially in organizations which are, especially in the hospitality industry, where they are dealing with a lot of people from different parts of the world. And here it becomes very important for the employers to understand what the customers are asking or what are their needs, so that after understanding, through listening, they will be able to, give a better and efficient service. That is also one of the reasons, why many organizations, top organizations, they conduct workshop to let their employers enhance listening skills. And I think it clearly states about the importance of listening skills. Let's go further. And listening is at the heart of language development. Without any doubt, I think that is justified. And many successful leaders and entrepreneurs credit their success to effective listening skills. And Richard Branson frequently quotes listening as one of the main factors behind the success of Virgin Airlines, which is one of the topmost airline industries in the world, and the owner of that, the founder of that airlines, that is Richard Branson. He frequently states that listening is one of the main factors behind the success of their airlines. And why listen? I think it's very important for us to understand why listen. When we listen, we are able to understand the perspective from the other side. And that's how we are able to have a better view. We are able to have a better view. We are able to break away from our prejudices. We are able to understand the views from their side, and that's how a better relationship is also formed. And of course, it helps building trust. When you listen, that means it also speaks that you are concerned. You are concerned, and because of that, you are listening. And when you listen, when you learn the listening skills, basically you'll earn trust from other people. So it is important for us. That's the reason why also it's very important for us to learn listening skills. And thirdly, why we listen is to help other people to also listen. When we listen, the other people also, she or he also learn how to listen. So these are just one of the few reasons why we listen. And in listening, there are many stages in listening. There are stages are like receiving stages, understanding stages, evaluating stages, responding and remembering. Let us try to explain one by one. That is, the first is the receiving stage. And the first stage of the listening process is the receiving stage, which involves hearing and attending. Hearing is the physiological process of registering sound waves as they hit in the eardrum. And paired with hearing, attending is the other half of the receiving stage in the listening process. And attending is the process of accurately identifying and interpreting particular sounds we hear as words. And the sounds we hear have no meaning until we give them their meaning in the context. I think this is also explanatory. The first stage is receiving, and which involves hearing and hearing, and hearing is a physiological process. Whether since if you do not have any problem with your eardrum, you will be able to hear any sounds that is coming. But there may be many sounds coming, but unless and until you give attention to the sounds, you will not be able to truly identify, you will not be able to truly identify and also interpret the particular sounds or words that is coming. And so that's about hearing and listening. Hearing, you just cannot help it, but attending, is one of the main process in listening process. The second one is understanding. The second stage is understanding. Understanding takes place after you have received the information from the speaker and begin to process its meaning. And the understanding stage is the stage during which the listener determines the context and meanings of the words that are heard through a process called decoding. So first is receiving the sound, and the second stage is understanding, right? When you hear the sound, you try to understand what is the speaker speaking, or what are its meaning, right? So this is the stage is called the understanding stage. And the third stage is the remembering stage. What good would it do in a conversation if you forget everything the speaker had just said? This stage of the listening process might seem very similar to the first two, but it goes beyond merely absorbing and processing information. Remembering is also about retaining that information, and the most effective way to do is an important conversation is to move the key element of a message from your short-term memory and into your long-term memory. And the fourth stage is the evaluating stage. And this stage of the listening process is the one during which the listeners assess the information they received, both qualitatively and quantitatively. And evaluating allows the listeners to form an opinion of what they heard and if necessary to begin developing a response. After the message has been absorbed, processed, and remembered, you can begin to sort out information into pieces like what is the fact and what is the opinion, and what's the speaker demonstrating any particular prejudice with their message, what portion of the message, if any, were exaggerated, and what parts of their message were interpreted and which parts were unbiased, and what was the speaker's intent with their message. Yeah. So after the message has been absorbed, processed and remembered, we can begin to sort out the information into the questions which I have just stated. And the other stage is responding. For listening to be complete, a response is important. Feedbacks or response, I think that's what they're right. Yeah. And responding to a message may take place at the end of the communication, immediately after a letter. And when it is stored for future use, the response may take place later. So now, the reflections on the concept to action. Let us try to think of a situation, where you had gone for attending public speaking, and try to recollect whether you have understood anything. If you have not understood anything, then you may be able to, reflect upon the processes which I have just mentioned, so that, by analyzing or by understanding those processes, it will also help you to understand what went wrong or in which process that you have not given attention. And that's how you can reflect upon it, and you can improvise, and that's how you will be able to develop effective listening skills. Well, remarks on this particular which we have just discussed. Well, listening is the most important part of communication, because if you fail to understand the message being expressed to you, you will also fail in providing a substantial and meaningful response. This is, in fact, the root cause of many arguments, many understandings, and complications, whether at home, school, or workplace. And being able to take control of the listening process will turn you into a better communicating overall. So, as I have just mentioned, if we fail to understand any message that is expressed to us, for example, a student or a learner visits a library and she or he is asking for a particular journal sections, but because you misunderstood his or her message, you took him or her to a book sections, and because of that, there's a loss of time, and because of that, there is agitation from the student, and because of which misunderstanding creates. So it becomes very important. That's the reason why it becomes very important for anyone in a service industry or anyone who are in a library information profession to enhance listening skills, so that they will be able to give an efficient service to the users. So, why listening is so important in library management? Of course, I have already stated why it is so important. In a library, there are different types of people come to the library, like students from different disciplines come there, and also researchers from different disciplines visits, and also faculty members also visits to the library. And of course, besides that, employers from any organization, especially like university, employers may also would like to do some studies or do some reading. And so, library professionals are dealing with different types of people, different types of people coming forward, seeking for different types of information. And so in such kind of scenario, it becomes very, very important for the professionals, to understand or to learn the art of listening so that they will be able to give an efficient service. They will be able to satisfy, the information seekers who come to the library. So that is the reason why it becomes very, very important, for this particular profession in library management to develop listening skills. Let's go further. Well, difference between hearing and listening. Well, listening is not the same as hearing, of course. And while hearing is a physiological process, and listening is a conscious process that requires us to be mentally attentive. And listening requires focus and concentrated effort, but both mental and sometimes physical as well. And listening means paying attention not only to the story, but how it is told, the use of language and voice, and how the other person uses his or her body. In other words, it means being aware of both verbal and non-verbal messages. And so why we listen? Well, we listen to focus on meaning sent by other people or noises coming from our surroundings, and to better our understanding of the other person's communication, to critically evaluate other people's messages, to monitor nonverbal signals, to indicate that we are interested or paying attention, to empathize with others and show we care for them, and to engage in negotiation and dialogue. So these are some of the reasons why we listen. And the importance of listening, of course, I have already stated. I have also cited many examples, also used many quotes, which also stated many things about the importance of listening. Well, listening is so important that many top employers provide listening skills training for their employees, and especially like in like hospitality industry, where they are dealing with people from different parts of the world, from different cultures and communities. Here it becomes very important for the employees of any organizations in the hospitality industry to inculcate listening skills so that they will be able to satisfy their customers. They will be able to create a better impression of their organizations. So that is the reason why many top organizations, especially in the hospitality industry, they usually organize training programs, on enhancing listening skills. And the second one, of course, listening builds strong relationship, and while it may not come naturally to many of us, it's invaluable, communication. It is very much invaluable communication skills. And it also fosters good image, maximizing productivity, and even becoming a better speaker. Yes, like when you are able to give a better service, it naturally or it automatically enhances the organization image, and that's how you also get develop are able to have better self-esteem. And because you are able to listen properly, you are also able to maximize productivity, because you understand the problems, and because of that you are able to provide a better service, and that's how it maximizes productivity and even becoming a better speakers. Of course, if you are a good listener, you are able to learn more, and when you are able to learn more, you are also able to, in a way, you are able to speak better, and that's how you also become a better speaker by being a good listener. And listening is the most important part of communication, and because if you fail to understand the messages, it will create misunderstanding among co-workers and even even among family members, which I have already stated. Much beyond, of course, not only among co-workers and family members, but also when you go for a shopping, for example, sometimes you get irritated because you are going to a particular shop and asking for a particular item, but since you did not pronounce it properly, or since the shopkeeper was not able to understand or was not attentive to your expression, and because of which she or he was not able to bring the item which you were looking for, and because of which there is a communication gap, and because of which there is misunderstanding, and because of which there is also an argument. So it becomes very important. Listening becomes very important, and earn trust and respect from your peers. Yes, most listeners are, in a friendship also, like you also like people who give their time to you, who are good listeners, because it also shows that they are concerned, they care, right? And listening helps in understanding the problems and hence formulate better solutions. I have already explained, I don't need to further elaborate on that. And great listening skills help in leading a better working relationships, and good listening skills help in diffusing conflicts. I think this is a very important. Many problems in the world are because of misunderstanding, because they fail to communicate effectively, and because of which there is a communication gap. Hence, conflict arises. But if you develop good listening skills, you will be able to diffuse many conflicts. Yeah, and earn trust and respect. Of course, it's a reputation, and active listening can play an important role in helping you go ahead in your career, and it's a skill that can be acquired and developed with a little patience and practice. And types of listening. There are 4 types of listening. One is appreciative listening, and when you listen to appreciate, you are listening for enjoyment. You usually listen to music because you enjoy it. And the same can be said for appreciative listening when someone is speaking. And some common types of appreciative listenings can be found in sermons, in a place in the worship, from a motivational speeches by people we respect or hold in high regard, or even from a stand-up comedian who makes us laugh. So all these things are falling into the category of appreciative listening, where the main focus is, on appreciating what they are doing. Yeah, so it's this falls under the appreciative listening. Second one is empathetic listening. It refers to the ability of a person to understand emotions and feelings of another person. And another way of looking at it is by putting yourself in another person's shoes. A person displays empathy by sharing the emotion and feeling of the other person at a time. And people are more able to empathize with others if they have personally experienced similar emotions or feeling of the other person. Of course, this itself is quite explanatory, but I think it's very important for us. Empathetic means putting ourselves in the shoe of others, right? Especially during the time of pain, during the time of suffering, we are able to put ourselves in their shoe, and try to understand, the situation in that perspective. And I think that gives us, that helps us, even in our personality development. And empathetic listening is all about putting ourselves in our shoe, in the other person's shoe, and that we are able to have a perspective from that side. And comprehensive listening, comprehensive listening is the interpretation of the words and ideas. And comprehensive listening involves understanding the thoughts, ideas, and the message. And this type of listening requires that the listeners understand the language and vocabulary. Like if you are watching the news, listening to a lecture, or getting directions from someone, you are listening to understand or comprehend the message that is being said. This is one of the more difficult types of listening, because it requires not only concentration but also active participation in the process. And the more you practice listening to comprehend, the stronger listeners you will become. Because when you are doing a comprehensive listening, you just cannot do simply, because your main objective is to understand, right? And to understand, you have to be very attentive, right? And so this comprehensive listening becomes very important, in enhancing listening skills. The other one is informational listening. Yeah, informational listening is listening with a goal of learning, understanding, and grasping information. And informational listening is distinguished from several other forms of listening, such as relational, appreciative, critical, discriminative, and inspirational listening. And informational listening is considered a passive form of listening because the listener is not just judging, critiquing, or evaluating the message. They are just listening to understand it. I think since we are running short of time, let me go a little faster. Critical listening focuses on evaluating and analyzing information. And this is more active form of listening that includes evaluating and making judgments. And the listener is interacting with the information in order to make a judgment in a scenario where someone is trying to persuade a listener that they should adopt a technique. The listener is typically using critical thinking, and this is mostly used in a sales scenario. Yeah, they use critical listening. Selective listening, yeah, this is more of a negative type of listening. You try to select anything that is coming your way. So selective listening is more of a negative type of listening. It implies that the listener is somehow biased to what they are hearing. Bias can be based on preconceived ideas or emotionally difficult communications. Barriers to listening. That is, first one is a prejudice. Sometimes you might have a hard time listening because you do not agree with the speaker. And getting ready to speak or thinking about your counter argument, these are some of the barriers. Distractions. It could be a daydreaming, like you loses your attention because of that. You are not unable to listen. Yeah, and then the other one is connecting to what the other person is saying or making it about you, and giving advice and believing you know the answer, and agreeing just to stop or avoid the conversation, and looking through your lens, that is filtering attitude, beliefs, or experience, and only hearing the parts you want to hear, and getting into a debate. Another one is a physiological noise, such as when a person is having maybe sinus headache or hunger, or psychological noise such as stress and hunger. It definitely brings barriers in our listening. And the third one is information overload, which actually the contemporary society is going through this particular problem, that is information overload. Information overload is when you have so much information coming to you, which we are all going through in the contemporary times. So in a very nutshell, I have just explained about the barriers of listening skills. So let us go to the reflections of today's presentation. Well, from today's presentation, we have learned that listening is key to all effective communication. And listening is so important that many top employers provide listening skills training for their employees. And we have also understood the different stages of listening. And we have also understood that listening is so important that many top employers provide listening training skills, for their employees. And listening builds strong relationships, and while it may not come naturally to many of us, it's an invaluable communication skills. And listening helps in understanding the problems and hence formulate better solutions. And we have also understood the different types of listening and different barriers of listening. So with this, we come to the end of our today's discussion. Thank you very much.